Architects of Change Live, conversations with change makers who are moving humanity forward. And I am super excited to welcome to that conversation Marcia Gay Harden. This is her new book. It's called The Seasons of My Mother, and a memoir of love, family, and flowers. It's a beautiful book on the outside, but an even more beautiful book on the inside. It's about your mom and your family's journey with Alzheimer's, and so we are bonded together.
Absolutely.
In this space of trying to be daughters who ring the bells to the rest of the world about brain health, about caregiving, about what's happening to our parents, about what's happening to our country. This is a must-listen to conversation, whether you have Alzheimer's in your family or not, because it's going to come to your family. It comes to every doorstep, and it's come to both of ours. And so welcome.
Thank
and
you.
Congratulations on this book. This book is important. It is eye-opening, it is moving, it's heart-opening, and it's creating a huge difference out there to people. And I listened to Marcia speak at a luncheon here in Los Angeles the other day, and you were so eloquent about that you don't want Alzheimer's to be your mother's legacy, and yet it gave you the opportunity to write about your mother's legacy.
And isn't that so often what happens? Because the Alzheimer's person loses their voice.
Right.
They lose the ability to validate their own existence, to say, I am this person, and this is my daughter, and we did these great things in life, and these are my grandchildren, and I lived a life of love, or not. This is the life I lived. They can't say that anymore because they don't remember. They don't
And what did you want to be her
I wanted
legacy?
Mom's legacy to be the beauty of the life that she's lived, which is an incredibly amazing, complicated, wonderful life. Her name is Beverly Harden, and
this is the story of Beverly Harden.
Beverly, I call her Beverly. She's from Texas, Beverly, and Beverly is a beautiful Dallas lady, demure, soft-spoken, wore pearls even in the daytime, wears a slip with her blue jean skirt, which we're like, Mom, take the slip off. But we traveled. My dad was a military officer. His favorite words usually were curse words, which I've inherited, the wonderful ability to curse. And so we traveled all over the world. We lived in Japan, where she picked up the amazing Japanese art of flower arranging, which has a spiritual background. It's based in a triangle, like all great art. It's a triangle, but an asymmetrical triangle because it's Japanese. And for instance, in a Japanese garden, you never have a straight path because you always want to know. You don't want to know where the path ends, so there's always a curved path. And I think about that in some way, a metaphor for this and for what we're doing right now, because we don't know where the path ends. But I know at the end of that path is going to be a pot of gold, and that pot of gold is going to be called cure. And it's going to be a cure for Alzheimer's. And so we're on the path. Like a patient, we're only in the moment, fighting to move forward, fighting for a cure. And that's what the book became for me, was a way to tell my mother's story, a way to allow her the beauty of her life to be understood by other people. But also my mother always said what she wanted to do was help people. Yeah. And she wanted to always be helping people. So I say to her with this book, she's still alive, she lives in Texas, I say, we're helping people with this book, Mom.
How do you think you're helping people with this book?
I think people are connecting. I think the conversation surrounding Alzheimer's has so many, as you know, so many shameful elements to it. It's not that it is shameful, but people ascribe shame to it. So there's a lot of things.
We don't want that to be we anymore. We don't. We're trying to lift the shame from Alzheimer's
and let people join the conversation. And a lot of people, it's something everybody fears, so they're afraid to talk about it. As you point out so often, there are no survivors of Alzheimer's, and so it is a really scary disease. Also, this is a thief that knows every lock on the block, and it knows every door on the block, on every block, and it doesn't care which door it gets in. It is an indiscriminate thief, and it is a lurking and cowardly thief, because if you have it, or if I have it, we have it right now. And so it exists in people long before the symptoms show up. So it's a very cowardly thief, one that I just want to what is the word? Eracidate? Is that such a word?
Eradicate. Yeah, right.
So there's something with ER. I mixed two words together.
But I say, Marcia and I were just talking before I say that we are the survivors of Alzheimer's. We are the ones who are telling the story, and there are millions and millions and millions of you out there who are telling your mother's story, your father's story, your sibling's story, and your own story. And I want to know what you wanted this book to do for people who are the survivors, because those with Alzheimer's, obviously aren't going to be reading this down the road. So what do you want us, the daughters, the sons,
well, number one, you will know you're not alone by reading it. You will connect, but join the cause, because we have to galvanize. I mean, galvanize today. We have to galvanize the way the AIDS community galvanized, the way the cancer community galvanized, and they found a way to live with their diseases and to cure and find out the causes of many of them. So that's what we have to do. So this is about spreading awareness and inviting people to the table to galvanize around the disease, raise money for research, raise money for women's research, donate your brains to science, donate, this is the kind of things we need to do. We need to have those conversations.
So many people are, in the throes of caregiving 24/7.
Yep.
Many other millions are caregiving from afar, like you are. How do you feel caregiving for somebody that you're not with?
Guilty. You feel
Let's
guilty.
talk about that.
You feel anxious. You feel guilty. I feel anxious and guilty. I feel like I want to take my mother out of the setting she's in and put her someplace that feels like the past and eradicate this from her being, from her life. I want to set her up like a queen. I want to take care of her. I want to massage it out of her brain. I want to do whatever I can. And yet I know, and it's the horrible awareness of being an adult. They call it, I think, radical acceptance. Once I learned about radical acceptance, you have to radically accept something that you don't want it to be true. So I've radically accepted that my mother has this. I accept that I cannot change her life, and I can't give up my life for hers.
Okay,
and
that's really, let's pause a second with that, because that's a profound thing.
Yes.
To accept that your parent not only has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, but that line of, I want to help them, but I can't give up my life.
Yeah, which
that's a
so
hard
many
thing to
people
get to.
do. I mean, you've mentioned that you're capable, you have a financial background where if for your father, or if God forbid you should have this, you have the ability to set it up so your kids don't give up their lives for you. Many people don't. I
no, 99.99% of people don't. And I talk about that all the time, about the cost of caregiving, emotional, financial, spiritual, physical. And if you are a caregiver out there, it's super important to take care of yourself, because caregiving kills, right? And caregiving can wipe you out before the person you're caring for. So, and we with the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, we try to support caregivers and stuff like that. But kind of the emotional pull of it is what you're also talking about.
Right. You feel like if you could give up your life for theirs, you should, and that would be on some level like my duty. If it would bring my mother back, or if I could just care for her more, if I could just move into the smallest house I can so that I have the money to take care of her, that's what I would do. But you can't. So I was listening to something, I think it was on Dr. Hyman's The Broken Brain. One of the young doctors said, be gentle with yourself.
Right.
And it's hard to be gentle with yourself when your parent is slipping away, when her memory's slipping away, and when there's nothing on that path to go, I'll be gentle with myself until we hit that marker, that mile mark. Then I know something's going to change. How can you be gentle with yourself on a path that you can't see the end, the Japanese path, but what you know is at the end is dark? And it is, I think I was listening to Seth Rogen talking about it, how initially you think, you forgot where you put your keys. I did the same thing. You forget where you put your keys. Get her a tile. You forget where you, what you walked into the room for. Oh, we all do that. So you continually dismiss it, which I did ad nauseum, until now you're into it. And those little things that look simply like aging or look like everybody's distraction, now you forget the function of a spoon. Now you forget the function, she wants to go to the restroom, where is the bathroom? You forget the function of things that you know. And even music, we talk a lot about music, and sometimes I feel like such a liar, being like, oh, isn't that great? They relate to music. I feel like a liar because I know there's a moment when they don't anymore.
Right.
So I know that it has that has its own mile marker.
Right, but everything we always talk about is what can you do today? What is the present? And what you discover in Alzheimer's is that one case is one case.
That's
and
right.
That for one person, it's art. It's making flowers. Makes them feel more communicative. Maybe for another it doesn't.
Right.
Maybe for one it's music. Maybe for one it's cooking. Maybe for another there's just nothing. And you have to figure out like how to sit in silence.
Right. You do.
Which,
to be in the moment. It's all they have. The moment is all they have.
But I think what's really, because this is a huge amount of work, this book, huge amount of work went into this book, goes into really any book. But was your goal with this book to make people feel less alone? Was it to really say, this is my mother, I don't want you to think of her as someone with Alzheimer's? Was it a way for you to kind of process your own emotions?
That's a great question, because it really started as something the two of us were doing together.
Right. I remember when you first told me about it, that's what it was.
Yes. It was a flower book we were doing together. It was a way for Mom to tell her own story and to bring the beauty of what she did to people around the world. And then that got reduced to, we were going to do a flower book, a calendar book, and then with her loss of memory, that became me writing this memoir. So I'm trying to take her voice as well and put it out there and teach people what she would want you to learn. Like, for instance, I think you talk about this, and I wanted to ask you about this. I mentioned it at lunch the other day. Mom, we learned the power of positive thinking and Norman Vincent Peale and all that. Yeah. One of the things that Mom always says is thinking good, beautiful thoughts is good for the brain.
Right.
And so we talk about stress and how women can be more stressed, and that is not a good, beautiful thought, or being angry or being full of, that's toxicity.
Yeah.
And so one of the things Mom always said is fill your head with good, beautiful thoughts and enjoy nature and fill your head with these moments in life that are beautiful, really, that do come from flowers and nature. And scientifically, do you agree that's good for the brain?
Well, I think we know so much more about what's good for the brain today, and I think certainly negativity isn't good for the brain, right? Meditation, we talk a lot here about how meditation clears the brain, how sleep clears and cleans the brain. So for sure, kind of ruminating and going down a rabbit hole is not good for the brain, or being in a relationship or a situation that's toxic is not good for the brain. What we know that exercise is, that good food, a more Mediterranean diet is good.
And sweating. Apparently you have to sweat when you exercise.
High interval
it's not easy.
Training,
right?
Yes. But I think that we know so much more today than we did 3 years ago or 4 years ago. But what we don't really know is how hard it is for any one person to go through this journey. So that's why this book is so important, and because whatever you're going through or your loved one is going through, it's only made more understandable by people like Marcia writing accounts like this that help people understand, she went through that too, and she's a big fancy actress, and she but I mean, your life is very similar to the millions of people who are also daughters of, right? And so I think that this is so kind of, my mother is a crescent moon, and there's so much more to your mother than Alzheimer's, right? But you also really wanted to put that out there. You wanted people to know they're not alone, but you really wanted people to say, like, hey, wait a minute, pay attention.
Right. I wanted to honor my mom.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
Which is why all the different titles come, because our mothers are everything. Mother's Day was just yesterday, so it was a day of celebrating mothers and all that mothers do. And I wanted to honor my mom. I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am if it wasn't for my mother sort of shoving me out the door to an audition I didn't want to go to, and being so beautifully supportive of me. So I wanted to honor her with the book, and it became, I hope, a clarion call for people, as any book about Alzheimer's, I hope, is a clarion call for people to join the march against it, to insist, that we have funding in the government. I mean, this is something I think about all the time, because of the Alzheimer's affecting more women than men. Right. The divorce rate at women in their 50s are usually, that's where it's really 50-50. And if you're having to give up your job and you're divorced to take care of your parent who has Alzheimer's, but there's no funding from the government for it, how do you live?
Right.
I mean, it's not. It's literally, how do you live? What do you do?
Right.
It will affect women across the board so much more.
Well, that's certainly the question.
That's what you talk
Millions
about
of
all the time.
families are dealing with. But you could have written a book about your mother, her love of flowers, and not included the Alzheimer's component.
It's true, but it would have been cowardly, I think, as cowardly as Alzheimer's is itself, because there was a part toward the end where I had to talk about my divorce and I had to talk about my mom's Alzheimer's, and they were coming right synchronistically at the exact same moment. And I think I mentioned this in the luncheon. I was a heaving puddle of sobs on the floor for quite a while. But I thought, if I don't write about this, it's not honest. It's not an authentic book, and and then so what? Our lives have to count for something, and my mother's life has counted for so much, and even this last in disease with so little dignity, by letting it count for something, will allow dignity, I think, for it.
You mentioned, and this is something that I talk a lot about, you mentioned that people, when a loved one says, I can't remember where my keys are, or I can't remember that, and how all of us respond. You're tired,
right.
You're stressed out, don't worry about it. And what we now know is that Alzheimer's is 20 years, if not more, in the brain before you're really symptomatic. And one of the things that I like to stress all the time, if a loved one is saying, I can't remember, get them to a neurologist.
Right.
Get them to the doctor. Ask for a cognitive baseline, because it may be nothing, great, and it may be something. And then people say to me, well, like, then what?
Right.
Then what? I mean, what's
then
the
you
point
have
of that?
a window. You have a window to take control of your destiny. You have a window to relieve your children of so many burdens of, not of care, they will be there for you with care, but of decision making. I think one of the hardest things for a kid is to have to make a decision for someone who's still alive. And if you have siblings, there's bound to be variant decisions and variant opinions about what the parent would want. But if you say, this is what I want, or if you say, as of such and such a time, if I can no longer remember you, please go ahead and put me in a home. Here's the savings, or sell this or sell that. Like, you can describe, you can take control of some of your destiny. And I think that was what was hard on all of my siblings and me, was to make decisions for Mom, because she hadn't made them yet herself. And they're, listen, why in America, I think we're the biggest country who doesn't want to talk about death. Mm-hmm. It's coming. It's coming for all of us. It's coming. Right. So we should be able to have these conversations about it. So I said to my kids, okay, look, guys, you're the durable power. What is that? So they would
power
like,
of attorney.
But that's what they would say amongst themselves. They would be like, what's that? And I would explain to them, so you're the power of attorney. You're going to decide everything about money and finances. You're the executor. You're going to decide everything about who gets what jewelry or who gets what furniture. And you're the medical, so you're going to decide when to pull the plug, if we're going to pull the plug. And then they would argue amongst themselves, I don't think that's really the right one for me. And they all decided, and it's done. They know what they are.
Now, this is super powerful. You've just said it in a very good way, because people will say to me, like, why would I want to know any of that? And you just said in a very clear way, it gives you a window of opportunity to have conversations that we all find so difficult to have, right? And so just even at, you're 50, you're 40, you're 60, sit down and talk, like you just said, right? About what do I want? And maybe you don't know what you want, and that's okay. But the more you talk about it and think about it,
then you can ask. I mean, most people know if they want to be cremated or buried, but some haven't even had that conversation.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think most people know that. And
You
plus
think?
No, I don't think so. And I think most people think, we did a big poll that said most people thought their kids would end up taking care of them, and the kids were like, I'm not really
horrified.
Had this conversation, and nor do I have the money to do so.
Yes.
So I can't move there. I can't afford that. And so there's this big kind of denial at the table. So pass the lemons. So
of
we
what's
don't have
coming,
to. What's
exactly.
coming, right, for all of us. And what's coming is also different for if your mind is going.
Right.
What's coming is different for someone who gets sick and whose mind is there, right? So these are all, they're not gloom and doom conversations. I actually find them super interesting.
I find them empowering, and I understand why some people do think of them as gloom and doom, because we all have the same image of how we want to die in our bed one night, having just had a wonderful Christmas with our grandkids and everybody full of love. We want to die with the pot roast barely finished simmering or something. I have the same nostalgic Rockwellian type of images that how I want my grandparenting years to be. And I think Alzheimer's has told me, a couple things have told me, Alzheimer's, my divorce, other sicknesses or the tragedies in the family have said, oh, you're a statistic. You're not that, that image of the book or the movie or a Dickensian sort of lovely story. You're a statistic, and you don't know, if you will. My mother was the poster child, and I wonder about your dad too. I mean, so completely active, the poster child for what not to do, for what to do to not get Alzheimer's, and yet my mother got it. And yet your father got it.
Yes, right.
And we don't have it in the family that I know of. Do you?
No.
No.
So, well, I do now.
Now you do.
Yeah.
Right. So you're right. We're that generation of potential survivors.
Yeah. And we are really the people who are, as I say, the survivors today because we're telling stories. We're trying to use our voices. And there's so many millions of people out there doing who are in this larger community doing the same. So whether you have Alzheimer's or another form of dementia or other, Parkinson's or whatever other brain-related diseases, it's really important, I think, to talk about it. That's why books like Marcia's The Seasons of My Mother are so important, because we were talking about, you were saying like, oh my gosh, are enough people buying the book? Please buy the book. Please buy the book, so she knows that it's out there and it's selling and it's making a dent. But I was saying to her, you never know how your voice is being heard, or you never know life is going to change by what you're putting in this book.
That's
or by
true.
Talking about how you feel being a caregiver from afar, or how you are now having that conversation with your kids. And someone make a home tonight and have that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And my mother would say, repurpose your pain. I'm a wound licker from the get-go. I can lick my wound with the best of them. But at some point you have to say, enough. Repurpose your pain, get out there and make a difference, and take the person you love's life and hold it up and make a difference with that life. So that's.
Do you
what
feel
we're
like
doing.
you're making a difference?
I do, because people are writing me on social media and other places. They're writing to say, my parent had it and this is what we do and thank you so much. Or caregivers are writing and saying, people don't understand how hard it is, how physically exhausting it is, how emotionally exhausting it is. And yet, for Mother's Day, I posted to caregivers because I thought, you're, whatever sex you are, you're mothering. And mothering is nurturing, and you're nurturing and mothering. And so people are writing back, and I think, Tiananmen Square taught us, it takes one.
Yeah.
It takes one.
Yeah. Well, the book, as I said, is The Seasons of My Mother. Marcia Gay Harden has written this beautiful book. Please support her. Please support the book. You don't have to have Alzheimer's in your family to enjoy the book or get something out
funny.
of the book.
There's a lot of fun stuff in it.
She's very funny, very profound, very moving. If you do have Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, get the book. And support her in her journey to tell the story of her mother, which is really the story of so many millions of people. And we all are the same, and yet we're all different, and we all learn from each other's stories. So thank you so much for coming on here, for doing this work. I remember you coming up to me like a year or 2 years ago saying, I'm going to do this book. You did it.
Right.
You did it.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to your
so
gardenia-filled office. This is amazing.
Isn't it? It's nice. The book is The Seasons of My Mother. You can get it right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bless you.